What's going on YouTube? This is J Money here, and I am making a slight response video. I don't know how response videos are going to be made, but I'm just going to throw one out there and basically clarify something off of House of Champs' recent video as to, you know, we need a way to deal with hand traps, and in a way he's half right and he is half misled in certain areas. And what do I mean by this? Well, let's go ahead and I want to pretty much discuss as to why hand traps are both healthy and not healthy at the same time, and why the hand traps are becoming a huge problem in certain instances. There are two sides of the argument. For one, hand traps are either ace, just, you know, not enabling your opponent to play their first turn, and they essentially just lose because hand traps are just getting so powerful to the point to where they're just covering all sorts of ground, you know, to where these hand traps, you know, maintain dominance. Now the hand traps is really what's causing the power creep in some instances. But then there's the other side of the argument to where we need these hand traps to fight against these decks that make these so-called unbreakable boards. But here is the main problem with this, with both of the sides of the argument, and the reason why is because we got a combination of two things. Hand traps are getting really unhealthy, but at the same time these decks are getting unhealthy at the same time. But there's been this certain pattern that has been set ever since early 2016, and I'm about to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, let's start with ABCs. I've said this a few times, but ABCs is a deck that only needs half of it to really function. The rest, you can fill it in. And, you know, this deck doesn't really need a lot of cards to get going. So let's say I wasn't playing these artifacts. Let's say I'll go ahead and take these out, but I'm gonna show you something, a little something about why these hand traps are getting ridiculous. But it's these best decks, you know, slash former best decks in the past that these people have claimed that these hand traps are needed for, that can abuse it the best, because their main strategy needs minimal cards to get going, so the rest of their deck can be splashed with all these hand traps, which is what makes this really destructive and really hand traps more overpowered in a sense. So let's go ahead and see just how much I can splash in here. So we're gonna go 3 Ash Blossom, because why the hell not, right? 3 Ash Blossom is just, you know, it's needed, right? But yeah, 3 Ash Blossom. We're gonna have 2 Lockbird, 2 Ogre, and let's do some Ciphering Gamma. Alright, oh, my bad. Let's do, yeah, 2 Gamma and a Driver. Now let's say I wasn't playing artifacts and I just wanted to play a bunch of hand traps. I got 1, 4, 6, 8. I got 10 hand traps right off the bat here, and this is just with new ABCs with set rotation. Now if we were going back to the old ABCs where we didn't have set rotation and all that stuff, I could have room for even more hand traps and still have a Kaiju engine for going second. And that I mean, because that's really healthy, right? You know, having, like, because these decks can go first and second. Now let's go ahead and take a look at one of our most previous examples. Let's go ahead and put what I'll say, yes, Zodiacs. This was, you know, when I noticed that hand traps were becoming a huge problem, because everybody was defending hand traps as a means to stop this deck right here, but little did people know this very same deck they were trying to stop abused the hand traps the most, because once again, this is all they needed. Okay, granted Raptor was at 2 at the time, but literally look, 19 out of the 40 card deck is just your main strategy, and really you only need 1 card to pop off, so literally the rest of the deck is just free stuff. It's just counters. That's really it. So let's take a look. We're going Ash. Where are you at? I know Ash Blossom's here. So it's not just these decks that are the problem, because these decks with these future designs are requiring less and less and less cards to actually, you know, be able to make these plays happen. Meaning that you need minimal space to build these decks, and then you can just splash as many hand traps as you need, because the decks that you use the least amount of resources can abuse hand traps the best. So look at this. Good. Just look at that. Look at that. Amazing, right? Hold on. Hold on. We're gonna get even more. Max C. So we got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. We have 16 hand traps, and we still have 6 deck space. So we're gonna throw in a Raigeki, a double, you know, a Dark Hole, a Kaiju Slumber, and 3 Kaijus as another option to going second, and then all my going first stuff I already have in my main strategy. You see where I'm going with this, right? Now let's look at the most recent one, Spiral, the deck that everybody is defending hand traps for. You know, the one that everybody just defends these hand traps, but little did they know, they don't need all this. They don't need 2 utility wire, they don't need 2 of these, you know, they don't even really need Destrudo. Look at that, they don't need all that, they just do it because it's just free extra cards. But if they really wanted to, once again, we can just splash even more hand traps in the deck. Because the best decks now, once again, take the least amount of resources to make plays happen. That's just fact now. The fewer resources you need to make plays, the more main deck space you have to just throw all this bullshit in. So, although hand traps are, you know, generally supposed to be good to fight against these so-called spam decks that make these quote-unquote unbreakable boards, these are the same decks that abuse these same hand traps the best. And so, hitting hand traps on the ban list isn't going to solve the problem. And at the same time, hitting these other huge decks, you know, that make super big plays off of minimal cards also won't solve the problem, because even if the format were to slow down, you know, and somehow Konami made these archetypes a lot more combo centric to where they require more cards to get their stuff off, the fact would still remain that cards like Ash Blossom would still be in the game that cover far too much ground, and in even slower formats this card is even more deadly. Which leads me to believe that, for one, either A, we're in an irreversible game state, or 2, these hand traps do need to be rectified, and then the format, and then these decks need to, you know, not be able to have so many cards that can do so much within just itself, if that makes any sense. You know, whatever happened to the days to where we needed 3 cards to perform certain plays, you know, to have good stuff. You know, like back in wind-up format, you needed like 2 cards to perform something. You needed a Dragonfly and you needed a Hornet to make a play. You know, these are specific cards too. You know, we needed Wind-Up Magician and you needed Wind-Up Shark. Again, 2 more specific cards that you needed to make a play. You know, nowadays, everything is just so generic, and you just need really just 2 of any really generic card, like a Quick Fix and a Super Agent, to go into a Helix, just to purely just make things happen. That's just how it was, and that's how it was with Zodiac. All you needed was just 1 Zoo, and you can make things happen. You didn't need anything specific, and you didn't need, you know, multiple things to make things happen, because 1 to 2 cards can just by themselves cover so much ground. And in order to counter that, we needed to have, you know, these hand traps do the same thing, like Ash Blossom. I mean, if 2 to 3 years ago, you would have told me that there was going to be a hand trap that was just that covered this much. I mean, we thought Effect Veiler was really good, but this card does way too fucking much for you know. This card is like way too ahead of its time, but so are the decks. And that's where that's the impasse we're at. What do we do about these decks that, you know, for one, we can stop late making it to where Konami likes to cater to players that like fast play. Konami caters to people, and what people want is for things to be easier. They want summoning monsters to be easier, they want combos to be easier and simpler, and that's when it starts getting more generic. That's when it starts getting splashed on every deck, and that's why we start seeing these linear formats to where we see the same engines and the same, you know, decks doing the same things, because it's just that linear and it's just super simplified to where it's just like, you know, why would I do anything else? And so we need these decks to not be as super simple as they have been. And for two, these hand traps need to stop covering so much ground to where if Konami does realize their mistake and these formats start slowing down and things start taking a little bit more thought process, a little bit more key cards to execute, you know, these hand traps don't need to be as destructive and as deadly, which means they might have to either A, get hit, or B, we have to have a card like let's say a quick play spell, because everybody's, you know, on House of Champs video, a lot of people mention Mind Drain, but the problem is it's a trap card, it's too slow, not to mention it's a continuous trap, which means it's not only susceptible to things like back row removal and sleeper and all that other good stuff, but the fact that it's a trap card means you have to set it for a turn, meaning you may as well forfeit your turn one, which nobody wants to do. Mind Drain is a very good card, but again, it's a trap card in 2017. It's not going to work unless you're playing bad cards like Bait Doll, the force active that Mind Drain, or, you know, playing multiple copies of Temple of the King. Speaking of which, hold on, is that card still at 1? No. So there's your answer. If you want to, if hand traps are really this dangerous to you, if you really don't want to get stopped by hand traps, either play Bait Doll to force activate these traps, or play Temple of the Kings. I personally would just play Bait Doll, because if I'm going second, I can still play it and force activate their utility wire and fuck them up. But yeah, that's my 2 cents for this. You know, again, my solution is, you know, like a quick play spell sort of thing, and not something that just turns off all hand traps or all monsters that activate the hand for the whole turn, because that's a little too strong, because that's basically a Cold Wave 2.0. But something along the lines of, let's say it's called like Mind Wash, and it's a quick play spell that would read something like, when a monster effect that would be activated in the hand is activated, you can pay 1,000 life points just to negate that effect. That seems simple enough. Your opponent can even have multiple hand traps, but, you know, if you want one specific thing to go off to get some plays going, like let's say I'm playing World Challenge and I got a few things that, and my opponent's got like an Ogre and an Ash, but I really don't want that Brilliant Fusion to get hit by Ash, then I would pay 1,000 life points and I would stop the Ash. You know, I'll take the Ogre hit on like a Venus or something, but, you know, at least one card got saved from a hand trap, rather than, you know, just playing a quick play spell and just turning off all effects in the hand for a whole turn and literally just playing uncontested, because again, that's back to die roll format. So, you know, you need a little something to, you know, your opponent going second should still be able to play, but not be able to completely stop you. That's the problem. People want to just completely stop their opponent. So it's just like, okay, it's still die roll format, because now we're heading into a time where everybody is making their opponent go first, because they're playing all these hand traps. Because if they went first and they drew all those hand traps, well, that would be kind of dead, you know? There would just be a bunch of dead cards. So now it's just, we've shifted from going first and winning because we won the die roll to, oh, I won the die roll, I made my opponent go first, and I completely shut my opponent down because I opened 2 to 3 hand traps, and I got to play, and I beat him. That's basically what it is. We now go from, oh, he won because he went first, or to, you know, oh, he won because he won the die roll and made me go first and dropped a bunch of hand traps. I mean, really, none of them are better. None of them make the situation any better because, and I know hand traps being made of this design is a sign of an unhealthy format, but that doesn't give hand traps an excuse to be this good. You know, I'm not giving hand traps an excuse, and I'm not giving these decks an excuse either. I'm just saying there needs to be a problem for all of this. You know, you can't rectify one side without rectifying the other. That's where I'm trying to get at. That's where I say House of Champs is half right. These hand traps do need to be addressed because they're getting way too powerful, but you can't do that without rectifying the other side of the problem, which is these decks just being very, very simple. And these cards being able to do too much by themselves. And so, with that being said, thank you guys. Let me know what you guys think. And I will see you next time. This is J Money. I'm signing out.